people are rolling in here. So as they're rolling in here, let's check out the chat real quick. We've got Eric PPG Lear, Bill H, Tommy Sutherland, Mark George in the house, Walter from Australia. Man, what's up from Tomorrow Upside Down? We also got Mark, George. Oh, you've been talking for a minute. Okay, that's good. Got a lot of people in here. Will Fly. I'm in there too. PPG, the other Nick, what's up? We got a lot of people rolling in. Tommy Sutherland, welcome. This is awesome. I'm really glad that y'all made it here. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sean Simons, also known as... What else am I known as? Oh, PPG Grandpa. Yeah, that's it. It's right down here. We do this ClearPropTV Paramotor podcast every Monday night. You can listen to us here and see us at ClearPropTV.com, or you can listen to us at paratalk.org. This is going to be an amazing show, and as always, let's introduce the panel before we get to the guest. We got ParamomUSA.com. She's our Linda Anderson. She's our cheerleader. She's the ones that book everybody. There you are. What's up?
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Monday night. You know where to be on Monday night, like right here. Nowhere else. Right here with us. Thank you so much for joining my chatters. I love you all. Much love. And I'm just happy to be here. You know me on Monday night. My chair is rocking and rolling, and I am ready to go.
If you guys want to be on our show, just get up with Linda Anderson. Just go to ParamomUSA.com. That does forward over to her Facebook page. Just say, hey, I want to be on PPG Grandpa's Paramotor Podcast, and she will hook you up on ClearPropTV Paramotor Podcast every single Monday night. We also got Eric Lear in the house. What's up, Eric Lear, buddy old pal?
Hey guys, happy Monday. Glad everybody in the chat and listening on the podcast can be here.
Awesome. Now, you also run a podcast too on Tuesday nights, right?
Yep, PPG Tuesday Night Hangout with Will, Brian, Mark, Shane, and myself.
And how do we get there and check out those shenanigans that you do every Tuesday night?
You can find us at ppglear.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Linda. And did we miss something? We missed somebody. Our guest disappeared. I hope he comes back before we finish saying hello to everybody. And we also got Will Fly from willflyppg.com. What's up, bud?
Hey, I hope we didn't scare the guest off.
I hope not, too.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I can't fly, but I'm going to do the next best thing, and that's talk about flying.
Well, flying is always good. Have you put out a new video since last week?
I have not. Nope.
But if we do want to go check out your videos, how do we do that?
You can find me at YouTube under Will Fly, or just go to willflyppg.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Will, for being on the show too. But this is not about us. This is not about the chatters. This is about one guy here that came here and said, I will be on ClearProp TV Paramotor Podcast on Monday night. And we got Todd Falstad. What's up, buddy? Good to see you.
It is good to be here. Thanks for the invite. Lindy searched me out on social media. Can you hear me? Because I had my thing dumped. I had to reboot my system.
Well, that's no problem.
You're getting my audio? Yeah.
If push comes to shove, you can always use your cell phone.
That is a possibility. Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Todd. We definitely appreciate you being here. For those of you that do not know, Todd, if you would, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into paramotors.
Well, I spent a career in aviation, and I had some heart issues, and I needed heart surgery, and it ended my career, and I thought I could leave flying in the dustbin of my memories, and I couldn't do it. So a buddy of mine had sent me some emails about powered parachutes, and YouTube in their infinite wisdom, their algorithms don't know the difference between powered parachutes and powered paragliders. So it started feeding me young Tucker Gott videos, and Tucker had about 2,000 subscribers at the time. And I said, hey, those things fly like a World War II fighter. I want to fly one. So I thought you could just click and point and order one. And I learned that, most people expected you to have training, and the people with consciences weren't going to sell you gear. I found a guy that would sell me gear without training, and I documented that experience. And I wouldn't advocate that for anybody, but it's the path that I chose. And I think it gave me a little bit of notoriety, especially given my historical background. But that, you know, that's behind us now. The sport has moved so far from where we were. There were some really, really shady characters selling training back then, if you even dared call it that. I advocated that we could do better as an industry. We could improve our safety numbers. We could stop talking about gear. We could stop talking about skills and instead talk about the decision process, and that would equate to more safety. And I think that we've made some real inroads. I think there's a real consistent product out there now if you're looking to buy training. I'd like to say that I think that I had some influence there. Maybe that would have happened without me pricking the conscience of some of the people that were selling training. But of the 4 or 5 people that I vetted for potential training and said no to in that time frame, none of them are still in business. None of them. So that's my story, you know. And I fly recreationally. I like to fly with guys that I had a heavy influence on you know, their development as pilots. We have a pretty big group in my former hometown of Lexington, South Carolina. We get together up there and fly a lot. Lots of big open ag areas. And I spend a lot of time in Florida now as a permanent resident of Florida. I still go back to South Carolina a lot, but you know, here there's just so many people and so many venues to fly, so many beaches, so many avenues. And it's really a great environment given that we have such good weather a predominant portion of the year. So
Well, I wish that I was down in Florida, and as soon as I'm able to retire in Florida, I'll be down there with you for sure. This Arkansas is warm, but we got snow and I'm cold and I don't like that stuff at all. Looks like we got JP Toolett joined us also. Welcome, JP. Glad you made it, buddy. Now, Todd, before the show, we talked about, you know, what we wanted to talk about tonight. And he said the philosophy of paramotor.
oh no, it's a life philosophy. It's bigger
The life philosophy of paramotors. Hey, you know what? It's all about paramotors, all right? I mean, that's what it's all about.
It is. And you know, like I told you in the pre-show, if anybody's tuning in to see the world's greatest paramotor pilot, I'm not the guy. I tell people I fly like your grandmother. Yeah, I maneuver, and yes, I've stalled a paramotor, and I've done some things like that. But you know, I know what I want out of this, and that is safety number one at the high end of the list. So if you're tuning in tonight, stick around. We will get to paramotoring. We will get to how what I call my philosophy, how it was developed.
And before you start the philosophy, I got a question for you. If we have questions in the chat, can we go ahead and ask you, or do you want them to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I'm familiar with your show format, and you guys have really encouraged a lot of people to participate, and it's kind of an open exchange. Let's keep it that way. What do you think?
Awesome. Will, you posted a question to ask?
Yeah, Bill H, question for the guests. How can someone like me get some free flying in before kicking the bucket?
What does he mean by free flying? Is he talking about jumping off a mountain without a paramotor?
Yeah, not free cost.
So I always razz those guys, you know, whenever I see their ads for free flight training, I always say, well, if it's free, how good can it be? No, plan a destination, Bill H. I mean, shoot, there's a couple, you know, not here in Florida so many because most of them are tow operators. But I can't say enough about Dave Hanning and his school up there in Tennessee. We spent a week there last summer. You know, search him out. I think his Treetop Flyers is the adjacent organization, but I don't really remember what Dave's, but if you search Dave Hanning, you can get up there and take a course. You can even get your P2 with him if you want. You know, certainly a trip out west to California, that would be a way to do it. It's a lot of fun. You know, if you've only flown motors and you want to do that, it's absolutely a must do. Absolutely. So.
Okay. Eric, you're on mute, buddy. You're still on mute.
Okay,
There
this
we
is
go.
from Paramotor Steve. How has your recovery gone so far?
Well, not as well as I had hoped. And, you know, part of our discussion tonight is going to be about the fact that I built a trike because that turned out to be a lot longer, lengthier, and more physically limiting than I ever imagined it would be. I'll tell you, getting old is not for sissies. I've had a couple major surgeries and a couple minor surgeries, and this one took me the better part of 2 months to be able to function without pain. So I used that time wisely. I built a trike, and Sean wants to talk about my trike, but I want to talk about what I was thinking about as I was building the trike. The build of the trike is pretty simple. The things that I passioned about in that trike build are pretty important, and that's what I want to convey tonight. So let me tell you a story. If this doesn't date me as probably the oldest guy here, it was 1979. I'm a freshman in high school, and I'm walking home from school. And what I typically would do is this was in the Chicago suburban area. I'd come home and I'd turn on the TV, and we had 3 channels, you know, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And then there was like PBS and WGN, and no cable in the house yet. And all 3 of the networks were covering this story. And the story was about an engine falling off of an airliner. It was an American Airlines. I have the flight number here. It was American Airlines 191, if you want to look it up. And I was riveted. I became a news junkie that day. And ultimately what happened in that, it was a DC-10, which in just a few short years, I was working for an airline that flew the DC-10. In an engine change, a routine swapping one engine for another, they had used a forklift and they damaged the mount housing for where that engine plugged into the pylon and got bolted to the bottom side of the wing. And they didn't catch it. And by not catching it, when it was taken off under full power with a full load of people and full fuel off of the Chicago O'Hare's field, it sheared off the engine. And the engine continued to run and flew up and around the wing. And it crashed and it killed all those people that were on board. And the story was horrific. It had a tremendous impact on the direction of my life insofar as aviation. I couldn't see the smoke from our house, but it was literally 30 miles from where we lived, where that accident had happened. And, you know, I watched it with, you know, riveted to the TV for a day or so while all of that was going on. And, you know, shortly thereafter, I was headed off to college and had an interest in flying and aviation all along, and eventually started doing that in college, and had another incident happen. I think it was my sophomore year in college. Air Illinois crashed in Southern Illinois. I went to Southern Illinois University, and the crash itself wasn't all that spectacular. It involved some failures of communication. But what was interesting to me about it was the way the NTSB handled it and how seriously the FAA took it. And that was formative. That was definitely something that made me consider any and everything that I did in aviation. So I got hired at the airline. You know, I learned how to fly in college, and we had a pretty good program of getting guys enough time to be fairly qualified by the time they got out of school. And I had 13 job offers by the time I was out of college. Kind of like kids right now that are involved in aviation. There's such a shortage of pilots. They're going to get employment almost immediately. So I was flying at the airline, and I used to make an annual pilgrimage up to Oshkosh to go to the air show. And I know a lot of paramotor guys have started to do that now too. And all of a sudden I see this airplane come flying by, and it was totally different than anything that I'd seen. It was a general aviation airplane, and they called it a glass air. Well, they're hyping this thing as a kit plane, you know, and kit planes were kind of getting started, and home built airplanes were kind of getting started. This was a big part of why the EAA was in existence. And all of a sudden this glass air comes by at twice the speed of the production airplanes. And they get talking about how lightweight this thing was and how strong it was. And and how fast it was on you know, lower fuel consumption than production airplanes. And I went back to work and I was just enamored with it. I wanted to build one. And I had decided that when the time and money and space were available, I was going to build a Glacier. So the captain that I'm flying with that month, his name is Carl Pascarell. If you Google his name, Carl has had his hands in everything to do with aviation. In fact, he just recently, I mean, this is almost 35 years after I met Carl. He just served as a technical advisor on the new series that Disney's doing to replace the original Right Stuff movie about the space agency, or about this race to the moon. So Carl and I are flying together, and Carl was a renowned home-built aircraft builder. He had 9 airplanes in his house and in his garage and in his hangar in various stages of tweaking. So I said, Carl, tell me what you know about this Glacier. And Carl at the time was working as the chief test pilot for a program that was designed by a guy named Ed Swearinger in the Swearinger SF-260. And it was an amazing airplane in its own right. And Carl impressed this on me. He said, look, if you take a piece of aluminum and you take 100 pieces of aluminum and you deform them until they bend and they ultimately fail, you're going to get a very predictable weight and stress input that's going to cause these parts to fail, right? And he said the problem with these fiberglass and these composite airplane components is that you can put 10 pounds on one of them and it'll fail, and another one will end up having 1,000 pounds on it, and there's no concise point of predictability for the longevity of some of these fiberglass components and some of these carbon fibers. Now, you know, this is the late 90s, so carbon fiber components were only starting to see their introduction into things like golf clubs and racquetball rackets at the time. And they weren't considered aviation grade materials. So all of a sudden, Airbus introduces their A300. And this is a commercial airplane that's, you know, approximately 300 passengers, depending on how you configured it as an airline. And they have carbon fiber on the thing. And guess who one of their launch American customers is? American Airlines. And American had its long-standing history of their airplanes were polished aluminum. And at the end of each night, their airplanes would go into the hangar and guys would buff on them with orbital buffers and shine those things back up and roll them out onto the flight line. They were always spotless. And now all of a sudden they had this A300 with this crappy looking gray composite painted tail that didn't match the rest of the airplane. And now I'm scratching my head going, but Carl, you told me that this wasn't a good choice, but the manufacturers figured it out. They came up with a lot better processes to get. So one of the keys to this fiberglass thing now is this ratio of resin to fibers. And they cracked the science to it. And next thing you know, all kinds of airplanes are being made out of fiberglass components. But subsequent visits to Oshkosh, there was an airplane that was really wildly popular. The van series, the RV4, the RV6, the RV8, those things they're just legendary. There's 6, 7, 8,000 of those things out there flying. They had a steel tube that ran around the inside of the canopy, and it blocked your vision, especially if you were a tall guy. It was like right at eye level. So I met this dentist, and he had one that his was, you know, 43 knots faster than the next fastest RV out there. He was really a detail-oriented guy, had a long history of private air racing. And he had removed that tube, and the tube was rollover protection. If that airplane flipped over, it prevented the pilot's neck from getting broke. And I asked him, I'm like, dude, where's the crush tube? How did you do this? He said, oh, I laid up this carbon fiber spar that goes in there, and it's only 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's stronger than that 1.5-inch steel tube that was blocking my vision. I was like, so what does it weigh? Oh, he says it's 1/5 the weight of the steel. Like, how about that? That's pretty cool stuff. So, you started seeing carbon fiber being introduced into airplanes like the Beechcraft Starship. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That was a civilian answer to the business jet market, turboprop, an all carbon composite and fiberglass airframe. And the FAA came out and said, well, okay, you can build this and we'll certify it. You can sell them and you can sell rides on them. But we're going to limit the airframe to number of cycles, because one of the problems with some of these composite materials like the Scout paramotor is they're not ductile. They don't flex, and they tend to shatter if they have an impact. And the predictability of their failure, with aluminum, you can bend it and say, we know the last 10 of these that we bent, when we bent it the 1,468th time, it snapped. And you can't do that with carbon fiber. You can't do that with fiberglass. The predictability spectrum is out the window. So they limited the life cycle of that airplane. Well, consequently, it was a horrible economic failure for Beechcraft. They put a lot of money into the research and development of that airplane. I think they built 11 or 12 of them, and most of them they reached that life cycle limit, and they pulled them all back and shredded them. And in that same time frame, the airliner market continued to adopt and adapt to these lighter weight materials. So when I first started,
we got a lot of questions that are popping up in the chat.
Well, let's take a question or two, and then we'll get to how this relates to paramotors and what I built. Go ahead.
Awesome. Will and Eric.
Yeah. So,
go ahead, Will.
Well, Brian Waller, shout out. He says that he really enjoyed camping with you and Sunnyland flying.
Yeah, cool. That was fun. Yeah.
And so Dave McClay, let's see. Where is your favorite place to fly?
Oh, shoot. Hands down, the Black Hills in South Dakota. That's just a clean kill right there. On one flight out there with Ryan Jones, who I'd never met before, he invited me to stay and camp at his house. We went out in one flight. We saw black bears, brown bears, elk, white-tailed deer, and buffalo on one flight.
Nice.
And good, reasonable elevation. Unlike some of the places out west where you're taking off at 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet. I think Black Hills is like 4,200 feet or something like that. So you're not running halfway across Kansas to get airborne.
Yeah, nice. Like the craziest thing I think I've ever seen, or the most exotic, is a wild turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I saw a skunk shoot his tail up when I was foot dragging, but I think Todd got me on cool stuff so far.
No doubt.
Well, we kind of have purposed ourselves. My wife and I have purposed ourselves to try to spend 3 or 4 months consecutively touring around in the motorhome, and I make it my business to go to places where I can fly. So it's gotten me the opportunity to fly in a lot of different places, and if you get the opportunity to do something like that, don't miss it, because some of the things that I've got, my other favorite place is everybody wants to talk about the Glamis sand dunes, but I found sand dunes in central Idaho this summer. We camped right in this oasis looking like campground, and I literally could walk 10 feet from the camper and take off from the sand, and flying there was really, really, really a fun thing to do. It's a big mecca for Salt Lake City area four-wheeler type crowd. They come out there for the weekend. So
nice. Let's get another question in. This is from Mad Sloper. Do you know anything about the proposed Fulcrum Power Pod?
I do. In fact, we have spent some time. I was talking about that with one of my wheeled pilot buddies here in Florida today. So if you're not watching Peter Schripple, you're missing the direction that paramotoring is going. You guys know who he is?
I do not.
JP knows who he is. Who is he, JP? Oh, he's got no audio. So he's the dude.
He's a big RC guy.
He's the big
like,
RC guy. He's the dude.
He
that
builds
loaned-
everything from scratch. I've been watching Peter for years. Like he has some amazing projects. Sorry, Todd, I'm excited about it. You know,
Oh,
'cause,
and you should
like
be.
he's making some headway. It's
I dig
need
watching
to
him
watch
too. Yep.
Peter. So he's the guy that loaned Tucker the 50 ducted paramotor fan matrix of those little electric motors, and they flew it around and they barely got airborne. If you haven't seen that video, that's a good place to start. But he's now figured out that bigger ducted fans make more thrust, and paying more attention to the detail of the construction of the fan development is going to make this thing happen. I think I have always said I will be the absolute last person to convert to an electric paramotor, but it will eventually happen. So, and Peter's on the leading edge. So if you're not familiar with Peter's stuff, he's like myself. He's not much of a pilot, but his ideas that come out of his head are amazing.
And the skill to be able to make some of these things are incredible too.
Absolutely. So let's talk about another turning point.
Okay.
So I was flying the 727, an airplane that was designed in the 50s, built in the 60s and the 70s. And I'm just putting in my time at the airline, and, flying my schedule. And I get to lay over somewhere and I turn on the TV in the hotel room, and there's this horrific footage of Al Haynes's crash. It was United Airlines, and they crashed in a field, or they crashed on the airport at Sioux City, Iowa. And what happened in that thing was the fan blades that all plugged into the wheel around the engine, that engine had a casting flaw in it, or a forging flaw. It had some debris in the metal that caused the weight of those fan blades spinning around to pull that thing apart. And it sheared all of the control lines for the flight controls. And the engine itself stopped running. The two wing engines kept running. And they were able to fly the airplane back to the field and crash land it. And half the people lived. And it was amazing that anybody lived with an airplane that was virtually uncontrollable. So that marked the validation in my life that these things are important. The engineering side of these things, material selection, the process. So, I flew another airplane in the meantime, but I ultimately went to the 777 for a significant portion of my career. And that airplane was the first airplane that was CAD designed. So if you have any interest in building anything for paramotors, a decade ago, it would have cost you $10,000 for an OEM version of AutoCAD. And now you can use Fusion 360 as a hobbyist. So if you have any desire to do this, the tools that were used by big production companies like Boeing are now in your hands. And that's where guys like Peter are making a difference in this, because one of my friends in South Carolina, his name is Philip. He doesn't do social media. He is classically trained as a machinist. So he went to a trade school for state-of-the-art machinists. And Philip introduced me to Fusion 360, and we collaborate all the time using Fusion 360. So I can draw something up. I can email Philip and say, hey, Philip, take a look at this drawing. I can't solve whatever it is. And he can open it on his end, and he can work on it, and he can solve it. It's kind of like open source engineering. And that's where the future of paramotoring is going. So when you put a guy like Peter out there and you give him the tools like Fusion 360, the sky's the limit, literally, because you've got this brain trust. It's no longer just one guy building a paramotor or building a paramotor trike or coming up with the next best product in his garage. It can be a community sourced brain trust project. And that's where we're going with this thing. So I decided, after having my most recent surgery that was sidelining me, that I needed wheels. And Sean wants to talk about my trike. So what was I don't know if you're familiar with some of the trike product lines, but the one that I paid the most attention to is Fly Products. Mostly because I really like the folks at One Up Adventures, and I like Travis a lot. And that's their product line. And I spent a lot of time researching their very deep product line. So they have a very lightweight trike that's probably appropriate for somebody that's been flying for a long time, that's not going to make hard landings, not going to side load their landings, all the way up to their massive 2-passenger dedicated tandem trike that uses a monstrous engine. So I kind of had to decide what was it that I was going to build. Well, I built one. I'm working on number 2, and number 3 is in my head and on the drawing board. So I want one of each.
Now you bolt those onto your foot launch paramotor, right? Is that called a trike cart, or how do you actually call that thing that you bolt on to a foot launcher? Is there a certain name for it, or what?
I don't know that. See, this is all new territory to me. I'm a dedicated foot launch guy. This is a temporary thing for me, but I got a taste of it while I was doing this. I got 12 flights on the trike that I built, and I was able to foot launch. Last week we had about 12 knot winds, so I was able to get out and foot launch. But it's kind of opened my eyes to there's a lot of unplowed ground, if you dare say that, to building better trikes. So the first iteration, 1 and 2, I have used my foot launch units and bolted them to the vehicle.
And that's similar to like the retractor trike.
The retractor trike's a good example. I'll tell you, as unbiased as I can be. Now I have a PAP trike, or I have a PAP paramotor, and I wouldn't say that I'm particularly partial to PAP's products, but the trike that they make, I think they call it the PAP rolling trike. It's hands down the best build for that application. It's titanium. It's super lightweight. It's designed to disassemble and fit into a bag about the size of a bowling ball bag. Seriously, it's a very small bag. It's probably 24 inches by 20 inches, and the whole thing fits in there. It's quick to assemble, and they've got all the angles and all of the engineering on it done pretty well. The problem is the price point. That thing is almost $3,000 MSRP. And I thought, well, I don't want to take their design and build a knockoff trike, but I want something very similar. I want to be in a similar weight range. I got looking, and to source the tubing is not even possible in the United States.
We got a lot of questions in the chat. The latest one is Deweese Milstead said, "What happened to you? What was your accident that you needed to build a trike?"
No. There was no. The accident is old age and biological deterioration. I had a hernia that I had one previously on my right side, and this was a left side hernia. I'd nursed the flying season to the absolute end. And when it got to be cold weather season, I scheduled the surgery. It was elective, and the recovery from that surgery was a lot more grueling than I had anticipated. Yeah, so that's that. No injuries, man. I've lived a charmed life with the paramotor. I broke one prop the whole time I've been flying, and it was because I slipped on wet grass.
And there's actually a question about a prop. Will or Eric? I think that was from Mark George someplace.
Oh, Mark George. Yeah, I know Mark.
Yeah, he just wants to know what kind of prop you're using now.
Well, I have one of each. I have on the PAP trike, I have the Helix 140, and it's inlaid with some specialty lighting that Philip and I worked on, and Mark has bought the design for that. So the inline prop lights that Mark is working, and I don't want to tip my hand here, Mark, on what I know about what Philip's doing for you, but I think the production issues are going to be solved on that here shortly, and Mark's going to have that product out there. That's a Helix product. I bought an E-prop, 140 E-prop 2-blade that I also put on the PAP machine. especially if there's something that needs to be tweaked on the lighting system, and that has to come off of there. Now, trike build number 3 is going to be a monster trike. It's going to use a 40 horsepower engine, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to see what Philip comes up with. So my buddy Philip is working vigorously at developing some propellers, and he's had some really great accomplishments and successes. He has had some spectacular failures. He had a prototype come apart on him, and it pretty much destroyed his paramotor. So
I heard monster truck wheels on a paramotor, and my mind just went to that. I'm sorry. It's
monster trike.
monster truck wheels on a trike. I love it. I'm thinking there. Will and Eric, there's a bunch of questions. I don't know if you can go back and help me
Sure.
ask Todd.
Yeah, Brian Waller, he wants to know, what is the scariest thing that has happened to you while flying?
Ooh, okay, so we got to qualify that. There's a whole lot more scary things that happen to me career-wise flying than have ever happened to me flying a paramotor. So one of the big disconnects here is when you fly recreationally, you are responsible for what happens most of the time. It's your decision-making process. When you're flying for a living, you're going no matter what. So you need to mitigate the risks to make that work. And that's where the scary stuff happens, because you make compromises and you say, instead of saying, screw it, I'm not going flying today, I'm going to put my paramotor back in the car and I'm going to go bowling, or go back and sit at the house, or go back and work on parts. At the professional level, I don't care if you're flight instructing or airline flying or working for a corporation, the boss is in the back of the airplane, and he expects to be wherever he bought the ticket or is paying the bill for that flight department to get him on time. And that's where the rubber meets the road. And a lot of guys don't see that from the recreational side, that they don't understand that. Well, how could they make that decision? How did that guy get into that situation, or did that crew get into that situation? It's because the pressures are different. Scariest thing that I've had happen on a paramotor, my first couple encounters with turbulence, and my very first takeoff when I realized I just took off in something I really don't know how to land yet.
Oh my goodness. That would be scary.
But I'd watched a lot of YouTube videos. Don't discount it. So here's my bent on internet learning. Right now, our friend Peter Sripple, the guy with the ducted fan and the one that made all the paramotors he works for Flight Test. He does all the RC stuff. His sponsorship is I forget who it is. It's something. It's a learning based. It's a web based. You can learn about anything. And I think if they were to put together an online paramotor course there, it might not be the right answer for everybody, but it would be beneficial for a lot of people. So sorry to be so disappointing to Brian there. I can't really, and I'm not going to get into my professional flying stuff that was scary, because that's not the topic of your show, right?
Well, I guess whatever you guys want to talk about. I mean, it's flying, it's aviation. I don't really care. I know that we got a lot of questions. I
am supposed to ask you, Resurgence PPG, which rocks, by the way. Todd wants to know what your fajita recipe is. I'm supposed to ask you.
Oh, is Todd Scandrett going to be at Wauchula in a couple of weeks? If so, I'll share it with him. If he's not going to show up, I'm not telling him.
All right, there you go. Offer on the table.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions here. One is from DeWeese and the other one is from Clark's video. I'll kind of put them together. How long have you been flying paramotors, and how old are you?
Okay, I'm 57. My heart surgery that ended my airline career happened when I was 50, and I took a year off and never looked at any. I sold my personal airplanes. I had a small stable of airplanes. I liquidated those. I kept the hangar, which keeps me. It's a residential air park. I don't live there, but it gives me a place to fly when I'm in South Carolina. it gives me a place for big paramotor projects and other projects as well. And I started flying 6 seasons ago this spring now. So yeah. And you know, I don't fly every day, and the first year was tough. So I had to work through some mental things about flying again. But you know, now pretty much if there's a string of 2 or 3 good days, you can bet I'm flying at least one of them. And I don't really have any limitations on super cold weather, although I tend to be more partial towards the warmer weather. You know, if it's much below 40, I don't derive as much enjoyment out of it as somebody that might just be starting out. I'm not building time for a job or anything like that. But if the weather's good and or if there's something to see that I haven't seen, let's go. Get the gear out. Let's go flying.
How long do you normally go out for a flight? I mean, I usually top off my tanks and try to get out there as long as I can, 2.5 hours for a flight. I just love to be out there and enjoy flying. But I know that
I
some
do
people
too.
do.
I like to put together like cross country events, or you know, a specific destination. You know, I don't really like the plan of saying I'm just going to take off and see what happens. I like to say, hey, today let's take off. We'll go do some maneuvering, and then we'll fly a 5-mile box around the airfield. Or let's take off and specifically go down to a motocross track. We'll fly over the motorcycles and come back. You know, I kind of like to have a brief mission, especially if I'm flying with more than one guy. I'd like to say most of my flights are an hour, but that's not really true, especially at fly-in venues where I feel that FOMO of, wait, is everybody else having coffee? I got to go land and see how they're doing. You know, so those tend to be a little bit shorter flights. But
yeah. Fly-ins aren't really for flying. Fly-ins are to hang out with your friends. I understand.
Sure.
Amen.
Any other questions, or we asked them all already?
How did you design the front of your the front axle of your trike? Bill H is asking. The front forks.
You'll never believe who was an influence on that. It was Kurt Pfister. And, you know,
I saw your video, so I knew what it was. And you're right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Kurt has a certain influence on our sport, whether we love him or hate him. And I've kind of warmed up to him. He doesn't attack me. I don't attack him. But all of his fly pod, which is not to be confused with the fly products line, casters. And his argument is that there's just enough pull on the mount rails. There's just enough pull if the wing's not perfectly centered to steer that without any pilot input, because of the fact it casters like a shopping cart. So it tends to follow the direction that it's pulled. And I wanted that effect. I had a child's bicycle, and I cut the forks off and machined and welded 2 tubes that actually my buddy Philip did that for me in my shop. He came over one day and we knocked it out, and I welded it up so that the axle was behind the axle of the tire was behind the axle of the steering input, so that we built a castering system. But let's talk about that. So I'm eyeing this third trike. So you had asked, Sean, am I bolting my foot launch rigs to these trikes? And the answer for 2 of those is yes. So my first unit was a ProPulse, and trike build number 2 is going to be the ProPulse fairly permanently mounted to that trike. You could take it on and off, but it's not going to be as simple as the first trike that I built to accommodate the PAP. So I had to choose an engine for trike build number 3. Well, what engine do you choose? So I don't know if you guys understand this concept or not, but there is a huge gap because of the engineering, because of thermodynamics, because of the laws of physics. There's a huge gap between 40 horsepower, or more reasonably 37 horsepower, and 65 horsepower. So what causes that gap? First thing that we have to understand is there are some equations that I don't see all of the paramotor equipment manufacturers adhering to. Number one is thrust to weight ratio. To all reasonable costs, you want as much thrust for as little weight as you can get. Does everybody agree with that?
I agree. Yeah.
Well, you know what happens is the paramotor, the paragliders are so efficient at carrying weight. Sometimes guys lose, they lose that vision of that holy, I can't tell you how many people's lives were lost to try to gain one more knot of airspeed, one less knot of drag, one more ounce of thrust for one less ounce of weight. I mean, this is just a never-ending battle that drives aviation development. And I think it applies to paramotor construction. So this gap from 40 horsepower, what happens at 40 horsepower is you can't rely on air cooling anymore because you can't dissipate the heat that the engine's making. So you have to go to liquid cooling.
Okay. All right. Can you say that one more time then? Where's that cut off and why?
About 36 or 37 horsepower, you can no longer dissipate the heat that will destroy the engine using air cooling.
Okay.
There's not enough air relative to the mass of that engine to keep it cool. So the next step in cooling efficiency is liquid cooling. Well, with liquid cooling, you need a radiator, you need the liquid, you need a pump to move the liquid around to keep it cool, you need a thermostat to control the temperature, and you might as well go with a valve train and put in valves and get rid of the two-stroke side of the equation, go to a four-stroke engine, and you've just added, 13 or 14 pounds to your 38 more horsepower motor to make 39 horsepower. You might as well go to 65 horsepower because that's the point where the gap in the thrust to weight ratio lineal plotting recovers. So there are no options in that 45, 50 horsepower range that makes sense.
So for people that fly the Moster 185, which is pretty popular out there, how much thrust is on that? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, I do. And on mine, we've measured it about 176 pounds of thrust. John Ripa had the same engine with slightly different propeller and different ratio. His made 180 when we did it down at one of the fly-ins last year. But we're talking really about 25 to 27 horsepower. And how you manage the thrust is really a function of how, that doesn't add weight. That's just a matter of tinkering to get thrust differentiations. It's the horsepower that's going to ultimately give you the thrust. So we need to talk about horsepower. And
okay, then how much I'm sorry. Then how much horsepower is a Moster 185 about?
Typically, it's going to be 25 horsepower at about 8,200 RPMs.
So 25 horsepower. So what would get you up to that range that you're just on that teeter-tottering between air-cooled and liquid then? What kind of motor?
Right now, your options are the Polini 303, the Viterazzi Cosmos is the choice that I've already made in my mind. That's the 36 horsepower solution. And it stays right on that flat line of plotting thrust to weight ratio. So to gap up beyond that, there are some solutions. So there's a guy, he brought a trike to Mountain Cities flying. It wasn't a trike, it was a quad. Okay. He calls it the Dragon. Super nice guy. I spent a lot of time talking to him at the fly-in. And he has a solution. He's gone with the Rotax 503 engine. And that engine makes close to 50 horsepower. And it's air-cooled, but it was notoriously unreliable. Rotax doesn't make it or support it any longer. So you can't plan production on it. Now he has, and you can buy the engines rebuilt, but the design is 30 years old. The engines are at least 20 years old. And he's offering a warranty with them, which is a cool thing to do as a manufacturer. But he has not designed that Green Eagle look-alike quad based on an engine that's currently being manufactured. And the thing that I'm trying to do with the designs that I'm working on is I want to make sure into the future that There's repeatability for the design. So everything is CAD CAM. And the parts can be sourced at least of the day that it leaves my design. We can duplicate it with currently manufactured parts, and you just can't do that with the Rotax 503.
Hey, Todd, with what you were saying, was that referring to 2 strokes, or is that the same with 2 strokes and 4 strokes?
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. There are reasons to go to 4 strokes for fuel economy. The 4-stroke and cooling with liquid kind of comes bundled to gain the efficiency jumps that you need to make that horsepower in that range. Yes, there are 2 strokes that are liquid cooled, and yes, there are 4 strokes that are air cooled, but that they're oddities, and they don't stay on that plotted path of we added more horsepower, we added a little more weight, and there's a linear climb up. They're somewhere off of that chart, which makes them poor choices, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I'd like to build a 50 horsepower monster, not truck tire, monster trike. I'd like to build that trike, 50 horsepower that can easily carry 2 big 250 or 300 pound guys.
So real quick, if you're gonna build a trike, why couldn't we build an electric motor with a bunch of different batteries that could let you go fly for a couple hours?
Because the weight too long. Okay, there's another equation that has to be, what's the duration of runtime is too short with the current technology, and the weight to get the duration of runtime up to where we would like it to be. I can't accept a 30-minute when it's over with, you have no power solution. Those batteries run until they're completely depleted, and bang, you have no thrust. If that happened in an hour and change, I'd be more warmed up to it.
Yeah, the SP140 that I test flew got an hour battery. So, with one battery, it can go for an hour. And if you got 2 batteries on the trike, then possibly, almost 2 hours with that.
I think
right now,
trikes, you may be onto something there, or, and I have thought about this too, is that trikes might be more apt to solve this problem or to usher in a greater acceptance of electrics.
Mm-hmm.
But, I flew a lot of airplanes in my career where they had various different styles of batteries built and engineered into the system. And electrical systems in transport category airplanes is the backbone of the system. That's where your reliability and your safety comes in. That's where the Air Illinois crash that I referenced earlier failed so miserably, is they had nickel cadmium batteries, and they had swapped out the nickel cadmium batteries for early LiPo batteries, and the crew didn't understand the difference in how they discharged, and it ultimately killed them because of their lack of understanding. That they were anticipating the lights to slowly get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer and go down, and that battery ran full power output until it had nothing left, and bang, everything went black, and they crashed in a cornfield. Gotcha.
It is almost 8 o'clock. JP wants to do a group shot for us, and we got a ton of questions that we need to ask you. And how much time do we have? I mean, we've been talking to you for about an hour. Do we have you for another hour, Todd?
Sure, absolutely.
Right. Sounds good. JP, whenever you're ready, unmute yourself so you can tell us when to.
Ready, guys? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, I wasn't smiling.
Ready? Okay, one more. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
There we go.
Perfect.
I can breathe again. All right, good deal.
Hey, Resurgence PPG had a question for you, Todd. He says, can you help me with a trike we need for a paraplegic we are getting ready to sponsor?
Absolutely. But I don't know timing wise. Yeah, I'd do anything for Todd. And I know that, in one of my videos, I referenced that Santa Croce used a wheelchair conversion for their Project Airtime trike that they take folks in that situation up with. And absolutely, if we had a chance to sit down and discuss, what Todd wants out of that trike, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Are you going to Bad Apples this year? That's
I haven't committed to it yet. I know I'm going to go to the replacement for the Palm Bay Fly-In, which is going to be down there at Okeechobee again. That's a really good venue. There's so many cool places to fly around there. We'll see with Bad Apples. I kind of felt it was a little crazy last year, and I thought it was unfair for me to take up as much space as I did with my motorhome. So maybe if I went back, I would look for off-site camping and just attend the fly-in by car or fly in over there.
I'll let you borrow my tent.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't take any space at all.
I think I'm going to bring a big tent too to Bad Apples. And as far as fly-ins, Bad Apples, I will commit to. Other than that, I don't know what I can do.
I got a real important question here. This is from, I haven't heard of this guy, JP Tulo. He's wondering who your favorite PPG TikToker who's sitting on the panel tonight and has a cloud wallpaper.
How many views? How many views is his most viewed TikTok had?
2.5 million last time I checked, right?
Isn't that amazing? What social media is just out of control.
Nothing to do with paramotors, by the way.
No,
That one. That one.
It had something to do with a paramotor pilot, though.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Who would that be?
Shameless plug.
Yeah, it's well worth it. Well worth it.
Whoops.
Everybody gets a shameless plug on this channel. We know that.
So, hey, you want to talk about material selection?
As far as like building an actual paramotor,
A trike.
a trike,
There we
yes.
go.
So, okay,
Let's ask one. I got one more question here.
all right.
Marshall Laney, he has a question. Do you fly with an ADS-B in? Would you fly with an ADS-B out if it was available for PPG?
Absolutely.
Me too.
Absolutely. No, I don't fly with an in. I don't think there's a whole lot of value in knowing that you're about to be run over by somebody because we can't maneuver out of the way so much. And the theater of operation for a paramotor is pretty small. You should have a pretty good idea of what's going on there aviation wise, and maybe you don't because you're not from the area, but you'll figure it out pretty quickly. If you take off and you see, oh wow, there's guys in military airplanes doing touch and goes here at the runway. That's the kind of stuff that I don't think having ADS-B in would really. Plus, two, wearing my glasses, it's all I can do to see the screen on my iPad or on my phone while I'm flying. I can't imagine trying to manage another display device to give me that kind of information. But I'd love to have out.
Do you see that in our future?
Oh, that's a complicated question. So Mark Ingram runs a fairly small group on Facebook where we talk about this stuff, and it doesn't have a lot of discussion because there's a lot of limitations in the installation and certification of these systems. And I think it's coming. I think the regulators need to make some adjustments or some acceptances for 103 operators because it's pretty tightly written that it's not really something that we're able to do and meet the standards of the airworthiness certificates or advisory circularies for installation of ADS-B equipment. There's not enough wiggle room in the regulatory side of it.
Gotcha. Now let's talk about the materials. This is the good stuff, the nitty gritty.
All right. So what do you guys think a trike should be built out of?
Something light and strong. So
Yeah, I like that idea.
maybe carbon fiber and aircraft aluminum, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm going to say carbon fiber for some parts, and I'm going to say aluminum and titanium for other parts.
Yeah.
I'm not even ruling out tube steel. 4130 chromoly tube steel is an amazing product. It's easy to weld. It's relatively, until COVID, it was relatively available in lots of different sizes. The carbon fiber thing has just absolutely fascinated me. When Philip and I started talking about, a better propeller, and so what drives a lot of this desire to build stuff or desire to design stuff is the fact that nothing's built in the United States. I mean, does anybody own or fly a paramotor or a paramotor frame that is built in the United States?
Yes, I do.
Which is yours?
I got the SkyTap Angel from Andrew Fuller. He also makes the Spartan. Okay. Isn't Blackhawk made in America too, or? I
think that Blackhawk is making their Lowboy 3 trike in the United States. Yes.
Okay, so I think Andrew Fuller is the only person that I know, unless you guys know somebody else, that
the Sky Cruiser that's made up there in Minnesota. That's a domestically produced one.
Okay.
So the Philip kind of said, "Hey, will you help me with this, working on this fiberglass composite, carbon fiber impregnated materials, and how are they doing it?" So the they that sticks out in Philip's mind is Helix and E-Prop, and we think we know how their props are made, but they're not an easy process, and the tooling to build those propellers, and people wreck a lot of propellers, so props aren't really particularly expensive, but there's so many of them that get sold that warrants some research and development and production costs on the front end, because I think you'll recover it if you're selling enough props. So the carbon fiber process learning curve for me has been really, really steep. There is a lot to know. And I had this bias that goes back to the early days of, I owned a sailboat for a while in the Chicago area. It was one of the first production fiberglass boats in America. It was made by a company called Pearson. And somebody had taken this short little boat and cut it in half and extended it like 12 feet. And they made it into a catch rig boat. And they did it with chopped fiberglass out of a spray gun. Well, that boat hull weighed about 8,000 pounds. So it was ridiculously heavy. So I had this bias that, carbon fiber stuff's neat because it's light and it has a very high strength to weight ratio. There we go, that relationship to weight again. So I started learning with Philip, and I don't think that all of the parts, to answer my own question there, I don't think all of the parts on a paramotor frame or trike should be made out of carbon fiber. I chose in build 1 to make everything out of metal, mostly aluminum, a little bit of 4130 tube steel. And build number 2, I decided I would make all of the fittings out of carbon fiber. So I had to learn how to do it. And I'm not completely proficient yet. So here's the process that I've been following. I conceptualize the part that I need. And a lot of times this doesn't come out of thin air. It's like, you've got two pieces of metal that cross each other and they need to be hooked together. So you got to build a clamp that holds them together. So I designed the clamp in CAD software. And then I take that design of the clamp and I create a negative mold around it and figure out how to split it apart. And this is what I've been printing out. This is what the clamps kind of look like, or the molds kind of look like. And this is one component of a 3 or 4 component mold that will ultimately get compressed together, and it'll make a carbon fiber part. So when you get the mold all printed out, you mix up epoxy, and you mix the epoxy with raw carbon fiber, This is something called chopped toe. It's a pound of this cost me about 35 bucks or so, and you can't mix it directly with the epoxy. You have to inlay it by hand, and you build up sequential layers, and then you smash it together, and you try to squeeze as much of the epoxy out of the matrix as you can. There's an ideal ratio for strength to weight, and it's about 60% carbon fiber to about 40% cured resin. And you don't have to hit that, but that's the strongest that you're going to get. So if you don't have enough resin, you're going to have part delamination problems. If you have too much resin, you're going to have weakness and cracking, and the resin tends to deteriorate in solar conditions, degradation. So after this cures tomorrow, I'll have to chisel the mold off of here. I won't be able to separate it. You know, with more expensive molds, if this was made out of aluminum or stainless steel, I would be able to pry it apart and get the part out of it. But because I 3D printed this for $1 on my 3D printer, it's destructible, and it's all waste material except for the part that's inside. And when the part that's inside comes out, this is what the part looks like. So this component is part of a clamp system, and it does just like I said. It's going to tie the front spar to the paramotor frame that I'm bolting to it. This is the more permanent application, and this component weighs about 53 grams. So it's approximately 75% of the weight of aluminum. The sourcing costs on it were about the same cost of buying a block of aluminum and machining this. It's repeatable because I can print out more molds and make more of them. And it's 5 times lighter than steel.
Is that something you can make a whole paramotor out of?
Absolutely.
Wow.
This thing is infinitely strong. There is zero flex in this piece of material. Now, it's not impact resistant. You know, that's the problem with a Scout. You know, you trip and fall on a Scout, you got a lot of expensive repair work to do. But in the right doses, I think this is an amazing material. So what this has given me is, you know, you asked about clamping so this is a 2-component clamp that I've been working on. And this is going to bolt around the main axle. And the smaller hole here is going to bolt around the paramotor frame at the bottom. And this is going to hold the two together, and they won't be able to separate because this will be through bolted. And these 2 components weigh about 30 grams a piece. Now, the equivalent components made out of aluminum would weigh, 60, and made out of steel, they'd be closer to a pound for these 2 components.
Wow. That's amazing. And how did you come up with this ratio and this for paramotors? Where'd this pop in?
The internet. So that Skillshare is the name of the sponsor that's sponsoring Peter. It's called Skillshare. There are so the purveyors, the people that want to sell you this stuff, they're out there creating training content for how to do this, how to make carbon fiber infusions, how to do vacuum bagging, how to do open layup carbon fiber. The information's out there. You just got to go searching for it. It doesn't cost anything. I mean, the material costs, but the knowledge doesn't cost anything. You just got to go find it.
Wow. Amazing.
So I had a friend get hurt very badly in a paramotor accident. And it was a sad situation because he's a really good guy. And I wish he quit flying over it. And I wish he was still flying. My impression of how he got hurt was because he was flying at a tree and he squeezed the throttle expecting the paramotor to rotate out in front and him to climb up and go over the tree. And he was at such a high weight to thrust equation that all that happened was it accelerated him and he crashed into the tree. I rate of climb or excess thrust to be able to climb is so important. It is the single thing back to my airline career, the single thing that made the early days of flying at the airline dangerous. And I honestly believe that it's just by the grace of God that I wasn't involved in an accident in some of those early days until the better equipment came along. And by better equipment, I mean more thrust to weight ratio, better material selection, better manufacturing processes, better engineering in CAD, better training in so far as crew concepts and those things. But that's a whole nother topic. That human factors side of aviation is a whole nother topic. But I think this guy would have never had that accident if he would have been on a trike that was weight shift capable, number one, and that had enough extra thrust that when he squeezed the throttle, he'd have gone up and over that tree. That accident would have never occurred.
So how big of engine are you talking about? You're talking about like that Pliny 303 type of thing, or that 4-stroke with
okay. So this leads to when I started thinking I want to do this. I want to start building trikes. I got sniffing around, and there's a guy here in Florida who was very gracious. He gave me the better part of 2 hours of his time one day, and we talked about motor selection. And I don't, as much as I appreciate the time that he gave me, I disagree with his basic philosophy in building. So he's built over 200 wheeled paramotor devices. Yeah, you guys probably don't even know they exist. We see them at fly-ins. They roll in on trailers. They might look like they're 25 or 30 years old. For the most part, they're built around a lot of different engines. I think one of the worst choices for a paramotor engine is one of these construction equipment conversion engines. So they get sold on the idea that they're 4-stroke engines, so they're more reliable. A lot of times they have fuel injection, they have dual ignition, they have electric start, they get all the bells and whistles, but they weigh 125 pounds. And they're putting out 35, 37 horsepower. And it was suggested to me in searching around, Briggs & Stratton has a line of engines that they call their Vanguard series, and they're high-end construction equipment engines. If you need to run a concrete mixer all day long for the next 3 years, that's the engine to buy, because you don't care about weight. And that thing's bolted to a trailer and you drag it to the job site. I personally think it's an absolutely lousy choice for an engine to put on a paramotor device of any kind. They're just too heavy. And really, if you go 10 more pounds, so that makes 35 horsepower, you go 10 more pounds, you can get into the Rotax 9 series engines. They're 135 pounds installed. They make 112 pounds of thrust. So that's where that linear equation, here's if you're graphing weight and power, here's the Vittorazzi 180. Well, here's the Atom 80. Here's the Vittorazzi 185. Here's the Cosmos and the Polini 303. And then way down here is the 35 horsepower, or I should say, if weight's up here, way up here is the weight of those construction engines. And then the next engine on the graph is an aviation engine that makes an appropriate thrust to weight ratio. So I get talking with this guy, and I'm not going to divulge his name. I don't think he's committed to building any more paramotors. I asked him, with 200 of these things out there, undoubtedly you've built one that somebody got hurt or killed in. And he was very open and honest about that. Yeah, he said, I did it. As a matter of fact, I had one that the guy got killed in. I said, well, what was the fallout from that? Was there any liability concerns? Did you get sued over this? The family made the decision to destroy the paramotor. And I don't know that I'd be so lucky. So going forward, if I really want to do this, and I think I can design something that as we age and all of us move into a decision that, hey, I really still love paramotoring. I just can't foot launch anymore. I'm going to start looking at trikes, or I'm going to do the trike thing, and I'm going to commit to it. I think I could build something that the average guy is going to say, that's the one that I want, or that one is better because of these reasons that appeal to me. You're never going to capture 100% of the market, and that wouldn't be my intent. My intent would be to build a repeatable production machine you can get parts for very easily. The manufacturer of the engine is going to stand behind their warranty, and it's going to have ergonomic features and flying characteristics that appeal to a large percentage of the pilot group. I think I can build that thing. I'm really struggling with, the engine choice is for me pretty much right now, given Rick Davies' experience with the Polini. I was already calling Sky Sports to see about the engine that they had in stock. It was a Cosmos dual ignition, dual start engine. It's got a retail price right now of about $4,900. I drug my feet on it for a week, and Rick Davies bought that engine. So good for Rick. So they'll make more, and that's what I like about it. They'll make more. Unlike the RMZ 1500 or whatever it is, the Russian knockoff of the Rotax 503. Who knows what the supply of those things is going to be down the road.
Right. Let's see. It's almost 20 after 8. Any questions that we haven't asked in the chat or on the panel?
No, there's nothing in the chat right at the moment that I'm aware of. I want to kind of go back to your carbon fiber stuff that you were designing. Instead of using like a DOM metal, are you thinking of making molds for the carbon fiber for all that? And make the whole thing carbon fiber?
Those metal components, they're pretty good at absorbing impact damage and deflection prior to failure, whereas carbon fiber is a little more rigid, and those are the components I think for the long term. Guys use fiberglass axles on a lot of the trikes, and an awful lot of the trikes out there are using a 1 inch or 1.25 inch fiberglass shaft that inserts into a steel tube, and that's where they get a little bit of flex. But I want to build a machine that has true suspension, and the flex with those fiberglass rods isn't dampened. It's just random flex out there, and because it's thick enough, it's able to absorb that. But they come with a weight penalty. Those things are pretty heavy, and I think that for the choices that I've made, 6160 is a better choice, and 7075, which is a little more tensile strength oriented aluminum, is even better yet. So the first trike that I built has a one solid piece 6061 hollow piece of tubing for the axle, and the very end of it is plugged with bushings that I made out of 7075 to mount the wheels to. I don't see that changing anytime soon, but there are techniques out there. So there's a way to take any size tubing that you want and wrap it in carbon fiber and bake it in an autoclave and cool the metal out from the inside and slip it off of there, and now you've got a carbon fiber tube that can work. But so let's say you were to fly in and you taxied and one wheel went into a ditch and for a moment got twisted and torqued a little bit. You might be able to bring it back to your trailer and with some brute force bend that axle straight enough to fly and finish the rest of the flying. if that happened with carbon fiber, you're done. Yeah, because it's going to fracture.
Right.
And one of the problems with any of these composite type materials is it's not really easy to assess how damaged the part is if they get damaged. So I think you want to limit the use of carbon components and carbon fiber components to areas that are either need to be thin and you want it to be aesthetic, or like this where they're in a part of the construction that's not likely to absorb any impact. So I hope that answers that question. But
Yeah.
I do have a question. What features are you thinking about putting on a production trike like you're talking about? What are some of the features that you think people would want to have on a trike? And before you answer that, JP has to go. So farewell, JP. Thank you so much for hanging out with us as long as you have.
Yeah, always a pleasure, guys. Todd, thanks so much for coming on.
yeah,
Really appreciate it. Man, I wish I could listen. I could listen to what your mind is like, you know. You really need to write
just
a book.
regurgitate. Just regurgitate from other people.
I don't think one book would be big enough, dude. You really need to write a book. Like everything that you've got up there. It's
I think
it's
so too.
very impressive. So thank you so
Thanks.
much for coming
have
on.
a good evening. You bet.
You too,
Yep.
guys. I'll catch you guys later.
Thank you very much, JP. And also, too, guys, thank you very much for listening to us. We'll probably just keep on talking until Todd can't talk anymore. If you guys are interested in the spinning wheel of winning things, we're not going to do that. However, I do want to send some stickers out from Paraswag USA. Mark George has given us a stack of these things to give away. So thank you, Mark and Amy. We appreciate you. And I'll tell you how to do that in just a moment. So Todd, features that that you think people would really need or want in a trike.
So there's a fellow that flies the Green Eagle. The Green Eagle crowd is man, there's some good guys in there. They fly a lot. And Ashton Brunner built that Green Eagle or designed that Green Eagle machine. It's a quad. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. It uses a Kohler equipment engine as its power plant. And they came out of if you dare call it a factory, they came out of Ashton's hangar down there in Austin, Texas, right at about 254 pounds, right? So you guys know that the FAA has said that you can participate in FAR 103 with your flying contraption as long as its basic weight doesn't exceed 254 pounds, right? Does everybody know that?
Yes. And reserves and other things don't count towards that weight. So,
that's the number that I don't know how the FAA came up with that number. I wasn't around when FAR 103 was crafted, but man, it was written for guys like me. I had a lifetime of highly regulated aviation, and even without my health concerns, which would have prevented me from flying, it's so refreshing to not have to do all of the regulated side of the stuff. But that 254-pound limit's pretty high, in my opinion, especially with the technology that's available today. So the number one thing that those guys have done to reduce the weight of their machine, which will definitely be incorporated in my build of my monster trike, is hanging harnesses instead of a fixed seat. They're every bit as comfortable. And, you look at the Phoenix Flyer, you look at the Zenith trike, you look at some of these dual roll bar type trikes where the harnesses are hanging from those. They're completely adjustable. You can put the harness on, make all the adjustments, step out of the harness and hook it up to that machine and set it and forget it kind of a thing. And a lot of them are single point or maybe 3-point attachment. You're not going to fall out of it. They're very comfortable because they're fabric. They breathe. So if it's hot, you're not particularly sweaty.
Have you seen the SkyTap paramotor Angel? It has the fixed the fixed
Comfort bars, yeah.
comfort bars, if you want to say that, and they do hang, and they also have a lot of weight shift. When it bolts on to my trike buggy or whatever you want to call it, it does have a lot of weight shift, and I am sitting in it very comfortably. I have flown other ones that were on the ground, or are kind of more, I don't know, fixed.
Yeah,
And,
boat seat kind of a concept.
yeah, yeah. And I really do like the way that this thing actually sits. It kind of just it cradles you, and you can weight shift left and right, just like you do when you foot launch. Is that what you're trying to talk about, or is that what you're trying to say?
Well,
Something like that?
a lot of these bigger trikes, they're flying them with these triox wings, and they're just simply not relying on weight shift. I mean, Eric, you got a few trikes. What's that big one that you have?
Well, we have the trike buggies, and that has the suspension seat in it, and that's fully adjustable for us. And we're getting the Zenith here soon. We don't have it yet, so
I almost bought a used trike buggy. In fact, that's kind of what set me on this path to build my first trike. Was that it had Chad Bastian designed that thing, and I didn't care for the way the risers fed down through those
the hoops.
Yeah, I'm going to call them pitch limiting hoops, but I didn't care for that. And this particular trike was cobbled together from some parts that had a very short operational history and an engine failure, and it wasn't right. And I could have made it right. The price was right, and whoever bought it, it was a fair price. It was a motor, a frame, a reserve, all kinds of spare equipment, and a virtually brand new trike buggy for like $4,000. It was a screaming deal. And I didn't buy it because it wasn't the right price. I bought it because I wasn't looking for that project, or even if I'd have seen that project to the end and gotten it all tweaked and worked out all the bugs on the engine, I didn't like the trike design. No offense if you're happy with yours. One of the issues is a lot of these heavier trikes are simply excluding themselves from participating in any sort of weight shifting. You can squirm around all you want. That thing's rock solid up there. You're not imparting a lot of steering control to the wing by shifting your weight around. And I think I'm kind of willing to make that concession because you fly it differently. You're not going to fly near the ragged edge of stall. You're going to fly that wing fast. You're going to make, the roll in and roll out of your turns is going to be more of a decisive maneuver rather than a last minute type thing. You're going to fly it more like a fixed wing airplane, if I dare say that.
No, that's very accurate, because when I'll park that and get into the foot launch, that the foot launch is more maneuverable, with that weight shift.
Yep. And I'm willing to make that concession to build what I think I want to build. The other thing, Sean, is an infinitely variable way to manage center of gravity, weight and balance, if you will, and the attach points of the wing. And that's pretty easily done. Most of those, they either have rails with a lot of clips, or they have gone to the soft lengths that are limited in travel by aluminum stops that clamp to that bar. I mean, that's pretty much a no-brainer. Comfort has got to be pretty high. I'm really liking the idea on these type of devices to have access to electric start. You don't want to be pulling the start cord when you're trying to give a tandem.
What I'd like to see on a trike is an enclosure when it's cold. You don't have all that wind blowing on you, and it's a little bit, I don't know, like the free flight pod, something like that. But maybe that with a good helmet, that you don't freeze to death out there.
And we talked about this today, and I think you alluded to it earlier. What if we combined a couple of these ideas? What if we took Peter Stripple's ducted fan concept and built it into a trike that had an enclosure pod?
That would be interesting. However, he was having some issues with the lines going over that that double fan thing. He might need to put a hoop around it just for the line guides. But
I think he'll be able to solve that. So, you know, he can epoxy in. That was a function of something in the structure sticking through those ducts a little too far. And if he just plans a little bit better on iteration number 2 or 3 or 4, and that's the beauty of CAD. You don't have to go back to the drawing board and start over again. You go back to the drawing board and you change one little thing, and you've got, you know, if I don't know if you noticed in the beginning of his video, he was cutting all the foam out with a CNC machine. And then all he did was stack all the foam together and fiberglass over the top of it.
I saw that. That looked pretty cool.
So, I mean, that part's already solved. He doesn't need to redesign that. He just needs to redesign how far those spars that mount the motors or whatever they do, that they don't protrude through the outside of those ducted fan things. And I think he'd be better off doing one single ducted fan.
That'd be pretty neat. And I'm sure you've seen that one lady that had that big long pole with the fans.
Yeah, well,
And it kind of pulled her up into the air with a free flight. That was pretty spectacular too.
well, I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike. And to the extent that I can, I struggle with the concept of being the guy that does the sales. I just don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that handles the warranty issues. Not that I wouldn't want to stand behind the warranty issues. I don't want to be the guy answering the phone, listening to the story of how it is that it doesn't work and I need to fix it for somebody. Maybe I think if I come up with a trike design that's easily repeatable, especially if I can outsource the production. I'll tell you what, these little components like this motor mount, this is a tremendous amount of time on a prototype basis. If you went to production with it, this process of compression molded carbon fiber doesn't lend itself to production very well. There are other processes that do, but the parts have been built. So now that if I could get help making these kind of parts, I'd think about selling the whole design, but I got to get something flying that I let other people fly and they say, wow, I want one of those. And it happens. I mean, it happens to a lot of people. That's how a lot of airplanes get launched. You know, guys build one in their garage and they let their buddy fly it. And all of a sudden now there's 2 of them. And then they go to fly-ins and they give rides and everybody wants one. And now they're in business. So.
Absolutely. Any other questions in the chat that we've missed, Eric or Will?
Ron Waller was asking if you have training as a mechanical engineer.
I do not. You know, so I studied. I wish I did. I wish I'd have gone through an engineering program, and it was available to me at the university that I went to. But I picked business administration because it allowed me to bluff and spend as much time at the airport flying as I could. But professionally, you cannot escape the amount of training that you get in engineering realms. So in order to get through some of the systems understanding of turbine airplanes, you sit down with people, sometimes from the manufacturer, be it Boeing or McDonnell Douglas at the time or whoever it is. And you get a lot of face-to-face time with the guys that decided how it was going to be, the engineering teams. I have had the privilege of visiting a couple of those factories while they were in production, building airplanes that I flew over the course of my career and talking with the engineers directly. And so if I have a bent toward it, it comes from professional aviation. And if I have any specific training, I'm not even going to claim any of those credentials because, so much of those engineering courses are math-based, pure theory. There's not a lot of application there anyways at the educational level anyways. So no,
something tells me you would do really, really good in engineering school.
Yeah.
Well, you can't live life over again. And, I had college roommates that were in the engineering program and I never saw them. They were always at the library working, and I mean working. And a couple of them worked for NASA for a while. after college, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly. And there was no way I could get the flying time in that I got in college and go through the engineering program at the same time. So I kind of bluffed my way through business school and got a degree in finance.
Right on. Yeah, the last question is Bill H. Well, not last question, but Bill H. wants to know what fly-ins you're planning on attending.
I definitely will be at the Okeechobee fly-in in 2 weeks, or in March, I guess it is. That's a little bit more than 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be in Wauchula for a while there. I had a buddy of mine from home ask me to teach him how to fly paramotors. I said, you know, I know what's involved, and I've trained a lot of people how to fly fixed wing, and this is a big commitment to ask from me, and I'm not prepared. First of all, I'm not a USPPA instructor, and I don't plan on becoming one. Secondly, I don't have a curriculum. Yeah, in my mind, I know what you need to know, but I haven't worked it out and written down a paper curriculum of what we're going to do for lesson number 3 today. And there's guys that have, and they really don't charge that much. And I'm going to go there, and I convinced him to buy training from One Up Adventure, and he's going to be down there. So I'm really looking forward to being there, working with him. I may volunteer to teach 1 or 2 of the classes. Justin Fox in the past has asked me to teach weather and airspace, and we'll see where that goes this year. So I plan to be at that, and that kind of becomes a fly-in, although it's technically a paid training course. A lot of people show up to those. That flying in Eastern Virginia, I'd really like to go back to that. I forget what the name of it was. It was out on the outer banks of Virginia, north of Virginia Beach. But my oldest son used to live in Virginia Beach, and he doesn't anymore. So there's less incentive for me to get up that way. That one's coming up in the fall this year.
Is it Pace?
It was Pacefield, yeah. Yeah, that one was really enjoyable. I love flying around that area.
I plan on going to that one this year.
Yeah, I'd like to do some more of the Western ones, and some of the lesser known ones. If they do that Holland, Michigan flying again this year, I might find my way up there early summer. But I have a construction project at my house that I'm going to need to supervise for most of the late spring and early summer.
Holland, Michigan is awesome.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you posted.
Fly-in. I did. I got to hang out with that fly when I was visiting my sister over there, and it was fun. Yeah, I got to hang out with everybody, and yeah, Holland, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it was a little warm, but yeah, you got to do it. It was super fun.
I'd like to do that one. I'll probably end up at Bad Apples for at least a little while. All my buddies go there, and sure. That's close to home, so it's an easy drive. I mean, if I'm in South Carolina, that only takes me about 3.5 hours to get over there. So
there you go. Then it's a plan. Gotta do it.
One of these years, I want to get down there to Kyle O'Glee's when he does his Thanksgiving fly-in, but that's a hard one. My wife likes to be home at Thanksgiving, so that'd be a tough sell.
Yeah. I heard that's a fun place to be. So let's go. Yeah. But Holland is fun. That airport's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun down there.
Yeah, I stopped and flew with him one night. We got together and hung out. And you know what I wanted to see from Kyle was his. You guys remember when he built that the frame that had the gas tank integral to the mount? He called it the Dirty Bird. And sadly, it's hanging on the wall in his hangar. He never flies it. And I said, why don't you fly that thing? I mean, you spent all that time building it. You'd think that'd be a pretty cool. And he didn't really have an explanation for why. He's just like life goes on. Got busy.
Oh, that's funny.
So,
that's okay.
Well, I don't know. I hope we probably ran off all the legitimate people by now, huh?
No, we still got a bunch of questions coming in. Still got a full house.
Right. That's right.
Ben,
questions.
Paramotor NC, Ben, what wing would you recommend for someone stepping up after 1 year on an A-rated wing? Hands
down. Well, okay. So first of all, I'm not a gear guy, right? I'll fly any. This is a great story, and I'm sorry I don't answer anything directly, Ben. I know what you're getting at here, but have you guys ever read the book Yeager about Chuck Yeager? It's his own personal biography. You really should read it. It's fantastic. He's a bit of an egotist, but in his book, he talks about the advent of the Century jets, the F-100, the F-101, all the way through the F-106. And he was a test pilot working for the Air Force, and they were vetting all of these potential jets. And they had a unit, and there were some F-100s and some F-101s in the unit, and they were constantly dogfighting. And he got into a discussion with one of the other pilots, and he was qualified in both airplanes. So they went out and dogfighted, and Yeager won hands down the dogfight. They came back and landed and debriefed. They switched airplanes. He got in that guy's airplane, which is the 101, and he did the same thing, and he beat him in the dogfight again the second time. So for that reason, I'm not really a gear guy. This is a better question. The wing selection question is a better guy for a guy like John Ripa, who really eats, sleeps, and drinks and has owned and flown every wing out there. But having said that, all of these manufacturers are targeting specific markets with their wings. They have an A-rated wing as a school wing. They have a B wing, which is a little sportier. I hate the word spicier. I don't think that conveys anything. It's more maneuverable, and it has a greater speed range. They typically have a C wing that's targeting cross-country flying, and they typically have a C wing that's targeting maneuvering flight, or maybe even aerobatics, although it's not quite a full-on aerobatic wing. Then they have their competition slalom wings and their aerobatic wings. Across the board, any of those cross-country wings, if that's your style, be it the MacPara Colorado, be it the Gin Falcon, be it the Link 2, be it the Cougar, those wings are going to be vastly different than those A-rated wings. They're going to ditch some of that drag that gives you that passive safety. They're going to really open your eyes to energy management that needs to be learned, that the A-wing isn't going to teach you as smartly as those faster wings with less drag. And you're going to notice a lot more capability to pick a destination, go to it, and reliably get there and come back. So I can't really say one wing's better. And, you know, for a while I was a MacPara dealer. I don't know if I am or not. Still, I haven't sold a wing since the import successorship changed hands from Andy over to Brian Goff. I don't know where I stand with Brian. If I needed a wing for somebody, if Brian would sell me one or not at dealer cost, I don't know. But I do like the MacPara lineup, but I've never owned an Ozone product. I really like the Dudek product line. I think that the Hadron 3 is a bit of a step from an A-wing. That's probably not a step that the average guy should make. But yeah, I'd step into a reflex wing with the ability to add 2D steering at some point. I think that that's the normal progression for people in our sport, isn't it?
Love that 2D, the 2D steering. It's just amazing on my Colorado. Resurgence PPG, I'm going to combine them. What's the best flying experience been with cross-country flights? And could you please confirm who the good-looking Todd is?
Yeah, he's definitely got me in the looks department. But, oh man, that whole thing. We can't talk. We've talked about that on other shows and other venues, but man, that Scandrett had this wild idea that we needed to do a cross country, and it just went downhill from there. I volunteered to be the ground guy, and it was a lot of fun, and only one guy finished that whole iron triangle, and it was mostly due to weather. The weather was really not very cooperative.
Would you ever think of doing the Icarus race? Since
Heck no. At my age, okay,
You're not that much. You're not that much older than I am.
It's not just a function of age, Sean. If you haven't watched it, you need to go back and watch Tucker through that thing. It is physically grueling. That race is unbelievable.
I watched it. I saw how chapped and sunburnt he was, and physically exhausted, and trying to find places to sleep. And
that takeoff he does out of that parking lot in Jackpot, Nevada. He literally runs off the end of the parking lot, and it's a boulder-strewn watershed for 1,000 feet down into a valley. If that takeoff wouldn't have worked, he might not have gotten killed, but he'd have had 7 or 8 broken bones. I can't keep up with that pace.
Well, I mean, they have the two different types of races, right? They have the races that are not assisted, and they got the ones that are assisted. So you can always do the assisted races that have.
Well, yeah, I'm always up for adventure flying, but I mean, let's be honest about it. That's kind of like it's like playing B-string football in high school.
Still be cool. You can still say you did the Icarus race, right?
You can say that, but not everybody's going to believe you. I mean, come on.
If you put them on YouTube, they would.
No, I'd much rather get together with a group of buddies and say we're going to go around the base of this mountain, and we're going to go up the valley, and then we're going to come back down here, and we're going to sightsee. Yeah, I mean. I know. And I watched that. I'll tell you, if you don't watch it, the X Alps, if you haven't watched a couple of the seasons of the X Alps on YouTube, you need to do that. Those guys are sold out athletes. And, my days of being an athlete are well behind me. I have some legitimate physical concerns that I try to avoid high G flying. And it's just not for me. But I watched Kriegel Maurer, and his dominance of the X Alps is unbelievable. And those guys are hiking. If the weather's bad, those guys are climbing. They're climbing 6,000 and 7,000 meters a morning, and then they're launching and sled riding down and doing it again. So they're in position for that evening. That's just a grueling, physical, demanding. Yeah. I got into PPG and paramotoring and paragliding way too late. If I'd have done it in my 20s, it would have been a different story. But wait until I was in my 50s. Forget it.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel the same way. And
oh, just stop. You guys are like so old. Oh my God. Oh, please.
We're trying to stay young at heart, and that's why we're doing the paramotor thing. We're
That's
both
right.
foot launching. We enjoy the triking when we're able to trike, which is fun. I enjoy triking.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy foot launching. I definitely want to foot launch as long as possible.
Oh my God. You're all like over the hill. Good Lord.
Well, we're over the 50 at least.
Oh, okay. I have right now, you know what? I'm just gonna because this is what my mom always told me. If a woman tells her age, then she tells everything. So I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Well, don't tell us your age. Don't tell us your age. But
No,
what year? But what year were you born?
Yeah, my closest pair of peeps know, but I don't. I just like,
It's no problem.
You could ask who was the president when you were born. I mean, that would work.
Oh, good Lord! Really?
Well, you know what it is, right? Women lie about their age, and guys lie about our height. So
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah. So that's another subject, but yeah.
Do we miss any questions in the chat, or did we catch up finally?
Yeah, so Brian Waller asked, what was your craziest launch you've seen in person? Was it at a fly-in?
Oh, absolutely. Holy smokes. Some of the, I'll tell you the level of discipline's gotten a lot better at fly-ins. Some of the early fly-ins that I went to were just absolutely crazy. I think about Jeff Pearson's was the first fly-in that I went to up there in North Carolina. And, Jeff's a colorful character. I like Jeff a lot, but when I got to the field, he says, yeah, you can do whatever you want. There ain't no rules. I thought, what? How do you have a fly-in and say there's no rules? And that is exactly what happened. There were no rules. So, guys, can I pin it down to one? I mean, holy smokes. There was one at Bad Apples, I think 2 years ago, where the guy's wing came up. He didn't have very good pitch control. It surged forward. He got back underneath it. And I want to say, yeah, he was foot launching. And he jumped into the seat. And that's never good, and he got really, really quickly rotated back, had a little bit of riser twist, finally got enough airspeed to have some control and went between two trees. And we knew that we were going to see him hit the power lines. And somehow or other came back around the other side of the field inside the power lines and flew out of there. That was absolutely insane. And it was just one of those things, it could have happened to anybody, but, you see the guy that blows one launch and he sets up and he's got plenty of room, but he doesn't go back to where he was. And he blows the second launch. Now he's at the middle of the field, which he would have never made the decision to start there. But since he blew two launches, it seems like a good idea as opposed to carrying all his gear back to the beginning of the field. And he'll take off from there. And I think that's what happened with this guy. He did not leave himself enough room.
And that's why I like trikes at a fly-in, because I can trike myself all the way out to the other side of the field, set up, and no one sees me launch. I can go and buzz around, do whatever I want to do, and come back and land where nobody can see me, take off or land or bust my butt, which is, why go to a fly-in and try to do something that you're not proficient in, and then you're that guy.
You're that guy. Well, okay, so I took a P2 course. It's the only training I've paid for in this activity. And I don't feel like I got my money's worth, but I did all the stuff to get your P2, and I never mailed in the paperwork. But we did this out at in western Colorado on the western slope, and it was pretty intimidating, as a flatland guy, to say you're going to jump off of this without a motor. And the consensus of the class was, if you got to the edge of the cliff, it wasn't like you were going to die if you fell off the cliff. It wasn't a sheer cliff, but it was a 60-degree pitch, and you were gonna fall about 10 feet, and then you were gonna roll all the way down to the bottom of that hill until it flattened out. And that was kind of the consensus, that it would be worth it because you'd be that guy. You'd have a great story to tell.
Todd, I just knew for sure. Paramotor NC said that I had a similar launch, and you had the benefit of watching it.
So you guys have all seen Will's video there where he makes the goalpost. That was pretty scary. But I mean, Will, I didn't really ever feel like you were out of control there, like the guy I saw at Bad Apples.
Oh no! But I said I couldn't tell you how I pulled that off. I mean, I still, to this day, I don't, and it is still the scariest launch I've ever had.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, someone was watching out for me that day. That's for sure.
Yeah. Ben's is a challenging place to fly, and I don't know how often Ben hosts people there, but you got to be on your A game there, or you got to have winds out of the east. That makes it a lot easier at Ben's. If you're going up that hill towards the tall trees and you got to get speed and altitude and then maneuver, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So
Ben's a nice guy, and it's a beautiful property too.
You noticed I didn't try flying the Samurai out of there. I was on that big one, so. Yeah.
So Todd, where did you do your training at?
I didn't. I was self-trained. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then, when you were talking about the power to weight ratio, now, is there something that is in between there that you're like, hey, this would work great if it was just lighter? And then if it would work, can you compensate that with a larger wing?
Well, yeah, and when the Atom 80 came out, a lot of guys were doing just that. They were saying, hey, I like how quiet. I mean, I think Kyle O'Glee did a whole series on him flying that Atom 80 with a really big wing. So let's do some simple math here. The 185 works really good with all of the wings that I've flown, and the smallest wing, because I'm a big dude, so the smallest wing that I've flown was Jeff Dean loaned me his Hadron 3 23 meter at Wauchula last year. And, you know, I wasn't at my lightest weight since I started flying paramotors, and I ran 80 yards to get that thing airborne. So, and that was with the 185. So that, I wouldn't go trying somebody's 21 meter free ride, maybe at the beach, but certainly not in a no wind launch situation. So let's think about tandems now. You know, we're going to add that second guy, which is going to pretty much come close to, it's not going to fully double our weight because we're not adding a second engine. We're not adding a second fuel tank, but we're adding the lion's share of doubling our weight. So maybe a 40% increase. It only makes sense to say if the 185 is making 25 horsepower, it's probably not a bad idea to reach out there to the 50 horsepower range. There's really nothing in that category that's currently manufactured. About the closest thing that you can come to is the Rotax 447 and 503 series engines. And the Rotax 447 engine is basically the same engine they were putting in the Kawasaki jet skis of the 80s and the Kawasaki snowmobiles of the 80s. Those are Fuji Heavy Engine Works designed that block, and that's pretty much the standard air-cooled engine setup. And, you know, dual McCuney slide carburetors, side draft carburetors, they're hard to keep balanced. That engine's really temperamental. It was prone to quitting. And their manual basically says, do not use this in a manner that you rely on the engine for your safety, you know. And the manual is pretty clear and spelling out that it's an unreliable engine out of the box. You know,
wow. So they knew it was unreliable from jump.
Well, I think that they, you know, had a really big ultralight flying and following, I should say. And I never got involved in ultralights in the 90s. I was too busy with my career. I couldn't afford it at that point in time. I had little kids, and the airline demanded too much of my time for me to do any recreation aviation flying. You know, I was happy to get 2 or 3 days off in a row after being gone for four days with little kids in the house. That was a accomplishment in itself. And when I had vacation, you know, I better not be thinking about going to the airport. My wife would have pickled my gonads. So, you know, until I got to the point where I wasn't as involved in my career, I didn't have time for recreational aviation. And by then, the ultralight thing, it was starting to fizzle. You know, a lot of the ultralight clubs had fatalities, and it just wasn't as much fun as it was when guys started doing it. And then Rotax wanted to move on to something different. The Hearth engines tried to capture some of that market, but they weren't as effective. And there were still pockets of guys flying ultralights, but not like the craze that was the early 90s with ultralights.
Right. And then now with you designing trikes, you know, and possibly manufacturing trikes, how do you know, and you touched on it a little bit, how do you deal with the liability issues?
Eric, I don't know. So here's my take on liability. In America, if you want to earn a lot of money, you assume risk. The days of getting rich by cutting down all the trees and being a lumber magnate or building railroads or mining, that's all locked up by big corporations. So how did I make a lot of money in my career? I managed and assumed risk for the airline as a captain at the airline. You know, how do other people make money in our society? A lot of the big cash flow businesses have to do with risk management and risk mitigation. And they'll do it for you. You know, you might have a problem on your property, or you might need a roof replaced, and they'll come do that work for you, but you're going to pay them for it. So I kind of view this in that same light, but the disincentive for me is I no longer need to go out there and swing a hammer or drive a nail to make a living. So I have to find a way to isolate my personal assets from legal attack, or it simply won't happen. I think the better thing for me is to build a design and sell it to somebody and have them produce it as their product.
I was just going to say that would probably be the safest, you know. Yeah, because what is it? There's a few paramotor companies out there now that are US based, you know, and I wonder how they're getting away with it. Of course, I'm sure they're incorporated and they have their, you know, their own.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I have considered is I have a younger son who's a very proficient welder. He's a professional welder. I could set this up as his business, and you know, he doesn't have the passion for paramotoring that I know of. We've messed around with kiting a little bit, but he doesn't live by me. And I've thought, you know, this would be a way for someone with young person's asset level that's really not going to be exposed to much in the way of litigation, because the first thing these lawyers do when they sniff around to see if you're likely to be a good candidate for me to sue you is what, you know, how deep are your pockets? And if you don't have any assets or money, you know, they're going to tell their client, well, you know, we might win this, but there's nothing to recover. So
Can't squeeze blood from a turnip.
Yep. So, you know, that might be the perfect type of a sideline business for a young guy without a lot of exposure. But, you know, this product liability thing doesn't go away as you age. You know, Piper Aircraft learned that the hard way. You know, they had people modifying airplanes that were built in the 40s and crashing them in the 1980s and suing Piper. You know, and the airplanes were manufactured in the 30s and 40s. And they would have done anything. They would have bought those airplanes back and sent them to the scrapyard or shredder to prevent the exposure to the liability that pretty much drug aviation down the toilet. You know, it wasn't until George Bush signed the Aviation Revitalization Act in the mid 80s there, or in the late 80s there, that there was a period of time for 5 or 6 years where not one single airplane was built in the United States because of their fear of product liability concerns.
You think that's why so many of these products are built overseas?
I know that's why you can't solve the litigation over the ocean to go after a company that built something in France. It's just not going to happen. The courts aren't going to support it.
Right.
And they're certainly not going to support it to the level that they did in the United States.
Right.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, and it needs to be solved. You know, if we're gonna do anything like this, you know, now the way that Philip's chosen to do it is he flat out sold a couple of his designs, a couple of things I helped him work on to Mark George there at the Paris WAG, and you know, who knows if someone. So Philip built a strobe. It runs on a cell phone battery. He designed the circuitry, proprietary designed the circuitry, ordered a bunch of circuit boards, soldered up a bunch of them, gave them to all of us as friends. But let's just say hypothetically that one of those things caught on fire and burned through somebody's riser and caused them to fall from 5,000 feet, and they could prove that that's what happened. Or maybe they don't even have to prove, they just make the accusation that that's what happened. And the guy was a high wage earner. Let's say he was a doctor or a dentist, and he really enjoyed paramotoring. And he left a widowed wife and a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old who still needed to go to college. And he left them with no income. Well, I don't know how you defend against that. And I don't know where assuming both parties had assets to go after, both, you know, in that hypothetical case of my buddy Philip and then Mark, I don't know who would be insulated given that the design of that product was sold off. That would be one for the courts. And, you know, there might be some legal precedent out there that would help you figure that out. but I don't, that's beyond my
Right.
desire to even care. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah, product liability is a concern, but I don't think it's as big a concern. And the guy that I talked about here in Florida that had the fatality in one of the contraptions that he had built, he dodged a bullet, but it might not have gone anywhere. I mean, this guy was welding these things up in his garage in Michigan, and what are they going to recover from a guy like that? $100,000 worth of machine tools and inventory, and then a lien against his income in the future.
Right.
The lawyers are looking for people with more money than that.
Right.
So
Interesting. We have crested over 9:00 p.m. and we've been talking for more than 2 hours. That's
I can't
insane.
believe that. Yeah, I
That's
know.
ins-
It just flew
I
by.
mean, boom, just like that. If you guys were looking in the super chat, the first 5 people, and somebody already texted me, the first 5 people that text me, their name and their address, I will send them out some Paraswag USA stickers and some ClearPropTV stickers. And if you won some merch from us, I already sent you out some stickers and stuff also. So Deweese, you already got your stickers. I think I put stickers in there. Deweese, I put stickers in there. If I didn't, I'm so sorry. But anyway, any other questions in the chat? Any other questions for our panel?
I just want to say this was a great show. Todd, I don't think I've ever met you, but
no, we met at Mountain City.
okay. All
Yep,
right.
we met I met both you and Jade at Mountain City. Yep.
Okay. I want to go back and watch the video of you building the trike.
Yeah, take a look at it.
Do that. Because it is really intriguing. The only input that I have to say is make accessories. Nobody makes accessories for trikes. Do you know how hard it is to find skis? We all might not have that problem.
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Actually, there is a guy in Florida. His name's Marty. He makes the carbon fiber fenders.
He does phenomenal work.
He does phenomenal work. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a few of his fenders, and he made Jade a custom fender that he painted, and it looks like a flamingo for her.
Oh, cool. Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
So, no, but I really enjoyed this show, and you're a plethora of knowledge.
Geez.
And it's very
Well,
interesting to hear.
I like
your
to say that I had a lot of experiences. So,
Right.
my career put me in a position where I got to experience a lot of things. So,
right. And I wish you the best on your trike. I really would like to see that.
well,
Come
trike
on.
number 2 is almost finished. These are the finishing parts for it. I got to buy wheels for it, and trike number 2 is ready to go. I'd like to have it powder coated. It's a good looking machine.
Yeah.
But where I really want to exercise my, I really want to reach out with a trike build where the motor stays on the trike. It's not a backpack launch unit.
Yeah.
And I want to build that monstrosity that can climb. You guys have seen the Tucker Gott video where he talks about the most badass trike. And it's that RMZ 500 powered, I think it's is that a Zenit? I'm not sure what the brand of that trike is, but it's an awesome amount of power for the weight of it, and it goes straight up pretty much. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's coming in the future. But keep an eye on Peter. Peter's a sharp dude, and he's going to solve this electric paramotor thing. Yep.
Good deal.
Probably. Also, too, somebody 3D printed a motor, and he tested the 3D printed motor not too long ago.
Oh, I'll have to watch
Did you see that, Eric? That
I
3D
have
printed?
not.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I love this
Oh.
3D printing stuff.
Was that, did I send you that link?
We talked about the link. I don't know who sent
Okay.
what,
Okay.
but yeah. I think you sent it to me originally. Then I went and looked, and then I think I sent you the actual video that they
Yeah.
went and flew it.
Yeah.
So So now you can 3D print electric motors.
That's
Who would have thunk it?
I'll tell you what, man, if you guys don't own a 3D printer and you like this kind of stuff, for $200, go buy a 3D printer and learn how to use Fusion 360 to program, to build. You might make something simple. The first thing that I made on my 3D printer, we got a swimming pool and it's got gates, and there's a little cap on top of the release lever to get the gate open. And that cap had been sun damaged and broke a long time ago. I spec'd it out and mic'd it. I designed the part. I printed it out. It was so satisfying. And that was my first 3D print. Yeah, you got one in the background there. So
Yeah, I got the Snapmaker, the 3-in-1. I got the biggest one. I've been making, all sorts of fun stuff. Chase cams, and of course the Millennial Falcon is something,
Awesome.
and a digital sundial, which actually
Oh,
works.
I did see that. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, but wait a minute now. That's all stuff you downloaded the
From
STL.
Thingsverse, and now I want to start creating. Now that I understand this, it also has a CNC and a laser engraver, so I can't wait to play with that stuff too.
All right. So start learning Fusion 360.
I saw the prices. It's kind of on the heavy side.
No, it's not. They have a hobbyist version that's free.
Okay. I did not see that one.
Yeah.
I saw the $1,500 for 4 years or 3 years, whatever it was.
Well, that's okay. So the limitations on the hobbyist side, there's some things you can't do. You can't draw blueprints directly from Fusion. You can't print blueprints directly from Fusion. And there's some limitations to the number of files you can save and keep open and collaborate on, but it's fully functional. It supports every single function in Fusion 360. So there's an educational license and there's a hobbyist license. And you got to figure it out. And I have to renew it every year to keep mine active, or I lose all my files. But go download it.
I just found it, the hobbyist user. I did not know that existed. Thank you so much for saying that.
Absolutely. So start there, and then I highly suggest watching the tutorials of a guy named Lars Christensen. He's Dutch. He lives in the United States. He's an educator for AutoCAD, and he teaches zero to hero courses on Fusion 360 competence. You can watch thousands of hours of instructional video on Fusion 360, and I just committed to it. I wanted to do it so badly. I said, every day for 3 months, I'm going to spend an hour in the morning when I'm having coffee, watching and acting along with my version of Fusion 360 running an hour a day. And in 3 months, in 1 day, you could do drawings. In 3 months, you had a basic proficiency to be able to design components and parts and output them to print them out on your 3D printer.
No way. Wow.
Yeah. Lars Christensen, Fusion 360 tutorials.
Okay, I'm writing all this stuff down.
Bill H said it's one of the best shows, and Resurgence PPG said that Todd's all right. We should keep him around, and I concur 100%. Man, thanks for coming on.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. It's been a good evening. So I got to talk about some of my favorite stuff with some of my favorite people.
Thanks, Todd, for letting me kidnap you to the show.
You bet, Lynn. Thanks for asking me.
You're welcome back anytime.
All right.
Knowledge. I totally appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Well, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I got a ton of stuff that I wrote down, and I'll go back and listen to this again. And for those of you that do not know, you can always go to paratalk.org to listen to all of our shows audio wise. You can always go back and watch these shows again. And you can even go over to Audible and to Amazon Music, search for PPG Grandpa's Paramotor Podcast. And here we are, our third season. This is episode 108 with Todd. And man, I appreciate you coming out and hanging with us for over 2 hours. Who does that?
Oh, we are like all over the place now. We're all over the place. So people say, where can I find you? And I just say, all over the place.
All over the place.
Yeah, I think that we're on all the platforms now. So
yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I only got one person that texted me for stickers. So if you want to, I left my phone number in the chat. That's my actual phone number, so you can keep me in there. So if you ever want to text me and talk about paramotors, guess what? Not only is it Monday that I like to talk about paramotors, but I talk about paramotors from sun up to sundown. My poor wife. Oh my God.
But she loves you.
She loves me a wee bit. I love
Yeah.
her too. Any other questions that we missed in the chat or on the panel before we head on out tonight?
I think we got them.
Yeah, I do too.
I think we did. Well, thank you,
Chatter.
everybody that's listening to us live, that's listening to us on Memorex right now, that decided to listen to our show on one of the podcasting apps. We definitely appreciate you. Real quick, let's go ahead and sign off. Let's go ahead and go through our panel real quick, and then we'll end up with Todd. So Linda Anderson, she's our paramomusa.com. If you want to be on the show, make sure you go over to paramomusa.com.
Yep.
And of course, that goes to her Facebook page. She is Linda Anderson, the Linda Anderson. There might be other ones out there, but she is the Linda Anderson.
I am the. That's right. That's
And
right.
she has, and you also have a very famous son that does something on Thursday nights.
Yes, I'm the paramom. And on Thursday night, we have paraglidingchalk.com with the awesomest host, Robert Michaels. And he will be back in town. He's back already, but he will be there on Thursday night, this Thursday. So I'll keep you posted on that. And he'll talk about all the shenanigans at Salton Sea and everything. So I'm pretty excited about that. So
I was so wished I was able to make it to Salton Sea. I guess we'll have to do it some other year, but hey, it's always going to be there, I'm sure.
There you go. Love you bunches, you guys.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for helping us out, and we definitely appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you with all my heart and soul. Did I do that right? Is that the right? I don't know. I'm too old for that. But thank you, Linda. We appreciate you. We also got Will Fly from willflyppg.com. Makes amazing videos. If you haven't been over to his channel yet, just go to willflyppg.com, subscribe, hit that bell notification. His videos are amazing. I mean, thousands and thousands of hits each video. I mean, done amazingly. Will Fly, tell us a little bit about your shenanigans and, I mean, you're amazing.
If you like corny humor and you like flying paramotors, check it out. Willflyppg.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We definitely appreciate you being on here, Will. We also got PPG Lear, LEAR.com. He does a paragliding paramotor podcast, a hangout on Tuesday nights along with Shane. Tell us a little bit about that, Eric.
Yeah, so it's the Tuesday night hangout, and this week we're going to be talking about the fly-ins that are coming up, and where they're going to be at and what's going on. And then you can get to that by going to ppglear.com. And then Wednesday night we have Flying Flamingo Jade, and she does a show that is all females that are in aviation. And I don't quite remember who she has on tonight, but she is really killing it with her guests, all the way from astronauts to skydivers to PPG pilots to major airline captains. I mean, she's done a very good job. So it makes my show look not very good. But anyways, you can find her at paramotorgirl.com on Wednesdays at 7 Central.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. We definitely appreciate you, your wife, Jade. That astronaut thing just blew me out into outer space. That was awesome. I loved it. So thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate you. And of course, Todd Falstad, amazing guy, amazing guest. We appreciate you being on here for almost 2.5 hours. I know that you had so many other things that you could have done other than hang out with us, but you hung out with us, and we definitely appreciate you, Todd.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And of course, you're on our chat now, our private chat. So you can come on anytime you want to. Every Monday night, come on, be part of the panel. We love for you to do that. That'd be great.
Yep, exactly.
So thank you so much, Todd. We definitely appreciate
Thanks,
you.
Todd. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, lots of, I don't know how you do that, but
Does
yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Guys,
yeah.
Yep, there you go.
I don't know how you do that, but that's awesome.
Like
So far, we had 2 people that texted me for stickers. So keep on texting me. I think as long as you text me your name and address, I will send them out. So go ahead and do that. But thank you guys very much. We appreciate you. This is PPG Grandpa's Paramotor Podcast, ClearPropTV.com, Paratalk.org. Find us anywhere out there that streams podcast. All of your podcasting apps that you love, just search for PPG Grandpa's Paramotor Podcast, and we're out there. Oh my God, we're out there and we're everywhere. Let me go over to the chat real quick and say hello to everybody that's still there. Paramotor Girls there, Brian Waller, Will Fly, Walter from Australia, Mickey Alberto, Eric Lear, Kevin Bush, the guy SC93. Let's see. I know there's more up there. I'm still going up. But of course, Todd with Resurgence PPG. If you haven't been over to Resurgence PPG, definitely go there. He helps out a lot of people in the paramotor community. We love you very much. Bill H. Nick Griffith. Hey, Nick, I sent you your stuff out. You should have got it already. If you haven't, give me a call. You won that T-shirt. James Robbins, Mac Fly Guy. I know there's a bunch more. I saw you. I'm just scrolling up. Deweese Milstead, Paramotor NC. I think I got everybody here. The what is that one? The Van Lander. Well, hello. All right, Vanlander. All right. Paramotor Steve, John Wayne. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you guys. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget to go over to Eric's channel at ppglear.com, Lear on Tuesdays, and also ppgshane.com. On Wednesday, we have paramotorgirl.com. And of course, on Thursday, we got that very famous guy. What is it again, Linda?
Paraglidingtalk.com. I'll be there.
Be there or be square.
That's right.
All right. Y'all have a great evening, and thank you so much. You guys, if you want to wait around a second, we'll talk for 5 minutes before after we say goodbye to everybody. Bye-bye.